Hi, this is Miss Litton, and this is a 7th period support getting ready for our Unit 1 essays, and these are excellent students that I'm already in love with. Say hi. Hi. All right. So where I would start is I would start with my website, and some of you, we've already been through this before, so I'm not going to go into the details of it because that was a different review session, but you just scroll down through the website. There, I had a little message for you. And we get here to our Google Drive folder. You will not be able to see these things in the Google Drive folder unless you're signed in with your school account, right? So that's proprietary information. However, if you are using this at a different school site, I will open up the documents so you can see them. So resources for review is where I would start. And then once you are in resources for review, and those of you that are out there, I would probably, like I said, I would start a Google Doc and share it with a couple people that you can take notes with. I would go into potential essay questions. Remember, there are 2 potential essay questions here. This one, these are written like the exam as it is now, post 2013. But as I mentioned before, starting here in the 2020 exam that you will be taking in May, there will not be any more grid-ins. You may still have a question that you need to solve, like say in the free response that is similar to this, but you will just have to write the answer or graph it. So that's why these, okay, yes, we want to continue, thank you. That's what you see, these math-based questions. And you just kind of scroll down and see, is there a question in here for me? And we get through the grid-ins and we get to the free response. The first one you see here talks about a selectively permeable membrane. Have we talked about membranes specifically in this unit, Unit 1? No. Okay, and you can look through all of them and kind of have an idea about them, but it looks like we're clear here for these types of questions. So now a second way you can use to prepare for essay questions is look at the old format, semester 1. Okay, and this is a PDF. So whereas the other one, I would save a copy and type my answers into, this one you can't do that. Sorry. Okay, and so do you see any questions here I could ask you about? How about the first question about water? Is that something I could ask you about? Yes, absolutely. Okay, now, these where you see this unit organization, these are past units in the past. So don't look at those and go, oh, this is Unit 1. We didn't talk about cell membranes or molarity of solutions in this unit, did we? No, and that's because this year I have changed out all the units so they match exactly the College Board and the College Board checkpoints, so you could use those. Okay, so these we can talk about. The first one is water is essential to living systems. Explain polar covalent bonding in a water molecule, in a single water molecule. Let's talk about that. The polar covalent bond, where is that? Where do you find in a single water molecule, where do you find the polar covalent bond? Yes?
Between the oxygen and the hydrogen.
Between the oxygens and the hydrogens, yes? And oxygen is more, can you give me a word, starts with an E? Electronegative. It has a stronger pull on the, that it is sharing with. So hydrogen becomes partially, and oxygen becomes partially, and that is the polar covalent bond. Boom. Okay, B, explain a hydrogen bond. Oh, let's not even do the and then yet. Explain a hydrogen bond. That would be between what? 2 molecules, right? Two different molecules. Okay? They are not covalently bonded together. They are 2 different molecules. Well, I take that back. You could have a molecule that's folded back on itself, and then you could have a hydrogen bond between them. Okay, all right, now. So these 2 molecules, do you have to have hydrogen in them to make a hydrogen bond? No. Is hydrogen often involved? Yes. Okay, and what you have is a weak attraction between something that maybe is partially positive charged and something that is partially negatively charged, and we saw that with water molecules, right? So when we look at a water molecule, we see the oxygen has a partial negative, and the hydrogens have a partial positive. Okay, what is this bond right here? What's that bond? Yes, a polar covalent bond. Now you get another water molecule in the mix, And the hydrogen here could have a hydrogen bond between that and another water molecule here. This is the hydrogen bond. It is a weak bond, but it is an important bond, right? And we talked about all the characteristics of water. We listed all of those out, right? And then the biological benefits of each of those characteristics. So here it says, explain a hydrogen bond and then explain how polar covalency leads to the hydrogen bonding between the adjacent water molecules. Because oxygen has a stronger pull on the hydrogen atom that it's connected to in that water molecule, it is partially negative, and it is attracted to the partial positive charge of a different water molecule. What is that called when one water molecule is with another water molecule? What do we call that hydrogen bond between? We say that is, what is that? Cohesion. And if a water molecule attaches to another polar surface like glass, we call that adhesion. Good. And then we went through the different properties. And it says, explain 3 of the unique properties of water that are a result of hydrogen bonding. And better still, tell me about that unique property and then a biological benefit. So let's start thinking of some of those properties we talked about. Can you think of one? Yes?
High heat capacity.
High heat capacity. So that means water can store a lot of energy. And where does it store that energy in? In the hydrogen bonds, right? Why is that a biological benefit? Why is having a high heat capacity? Yes?
Well, the water, like when it's hot, water can take in the heat and then release it.
Right, and keep the atmosphere cooler or keep our bodies cooler, right? Because when we sweat, what do we sweat out? Water, right? And then that water can help cool us as it takes the heat away from our body and puts it into the hydrogen bonds. Good. Let's name another important property. Yes?
Water in a solid form is less dense than water.
Water in a solid form is less dense than liquid water. So that means ice, a solid, will float to the top. And if you're in, let's say, a lake, the colder water is at the bottom, it floats to the top, and it forms a what? Insulating layer, which protects all the life underneath. So it doesn't, if ice was more dense than liquid water, it would stay at the bottom and then all the life would die as it froze up. What's another property of water? I like all of these. Tell your bio buddy a couple properties. You should know these right now. Okay, so let's hear some more. What's another one, Sophia? Water is a great solvent. Yay. Okay, water is a great solvent. Why? Because it has partial positive and partial. So it's really good for things that are hydrophilic, not so good for things that are hydrophobic. Your blood, you have formed elements, red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets, and then you have the fluid portion of your blood, which is plasma, and it is primarily what? Water. Okay? So we use that as a solution, right? The water to dissolve substances in and move throughout our body. Okay, great. Another property. Yes?
Cohesion.
Cohesion. And when we talk about cohesion and adhesion, we're probably going to think about plants and how we get water to the tops of tall trees through the TATC theory, transpiration, which is the evaporation of water out open stomata. Now, have we talked about that in specifics, like how plants work, xylem and phloem? No. So that's why I'm telling you, some of the questions they ask you on your AP exam are going to pull from multiple chapters. Right now, you're just trusting me about the way water moves through plants. Later, I will show you that when we learn more about plants. But for right now, you need to know water can evaporate out the open stomata, and what powers that is the pulling power of the sun as the water evaporates out those little holes in the leaves. The water has cohesion with itself, adhesion with the xylem wall, and then also tension. And tension has to do with water potential and how water moves from a higher water potential gradient to a lower. You don't know what I'm talking about right now about water potential. Don't worry about that. Okay, we'll hit that in a later chapter. For right now, because of the cohesion and adhesion of water, it helps it to move up a plant in order to get water from the roots to the very top. What else? Another property. Yes?
In order for water to evaporate, it must be at a high temperature.
It has a high heat of vaporization. So it can take in that heat. We talked about how that helps us to be flexible in the temperatures we're in. It also helps to cool our environment, right? Because if we're near bodies of water, it can hold in a lot of heat. if you're close to a body of water, and then release that energy at night. Okay, what else? Any other ones? Yes?
Has a high surface tension.
High surface tension. We said there weren't a ton of things that we could talk about related to high surface tension. We will look at how some animals can use that to move about on a leaf even though they're out of water. There's some other examples like that. Good. Excellent. We took care of essay number 1. Okay, essay number 2. Discuss the biological importance and molecular structure of each of the organic compounds in relation to cellular structure and function in plants and our animals. Have we talked about carbohydrates? Yes. What is the monomer for carbohydrates? Monosaccharides. What is the simple name for a monosaccharide? Sugar. So sugars are the bricks. The polymer is a polysaccharide. That would be like the wall. What we know what is a very common monomer of a carbohydrate? Glucose. Perfect. Okay, we also looked at fructose, fruit sugar, and galactose, which is a component of lactose, which is a milk sugar. Yes? I mean, it sounds familiar, right? Okay, so those are your bricks. You hook them together. What's the process by which you hook them together? Two names. Dehydration synthesis, another name. Condensation synthesis. And that's because what's happening is you have two sugar molecules that are happy in and of themselves. We have to take something away from each of them so they can solve their bond problems with each other, right? So we take an OH away from one and an H away from another, and what do we form? Water. And then now we have a disaccharide. We want to break it apart. What's it called? Hydrolysis. Hydrolysis, water to break apart. Okay? When we look at the polysaccharides of carbohydrates, remember the chart we made in class, yeah? We look at the polysaccharides, there's monosaccharides energy, short-term energy. Polysaccharides had two big functions. Can you remember what the two big functions of polysaccharides were? Storage of energy and structure. Perfect. Okay? Storage of energy. Oh, both are insoluble in water and are too large to pass through a cell membrane. Just saying. Okay? Energy. How do you and I store sugar in our body? Starts also with a G. Glycogen. Where do we store it? In our livers. Plants store sugars differently. How do they store it? Starch. Okay? Now let's talk structural. We looked at some examples of where sugar is used to build things. What do you call the things cell walls are built out of? Do you remember? Cellulose. Can I digest cellulose? Can you digest cellulose? No. Okay. So cellulose builds cell walls. Then you remember the one that kind of looks funny? CH, but it's a silent H. Chitin. And that builds exoskeletons of insects and fungal cell walls. That's structural. Okay? Those are carbohydrates. The second one we talked about, so we've talked about carbohydrates. The next one we talked, okay, sure. The next one, I think we're in that frozen zone. Next thing we talked about was lipids. Underneath the umbrella of lipids, there are actually two kinds of lipids. Fats and, good. Fats have two components to make them up. Glycerol and long fatty acid chains. Those fatty acid chains can either be saturated, stacked, or unsaturated. Where do you tend to find unsaturated fatty acids? Plants. And saturated fatty acids from animals. Which one is a solid at room temperature? Saturated. When I hook on 3 fatty acid chains to a glycerol molecule, how many water molecules am I going to make? 3, right? Because each one, yes? Okay. Steroids are how many, they're what? Rings of carbon. How many rings? 4 rings. 4 rings of carbon. And what is an example of a steroid? Estrogen, testosterone, progesterone. Okay? Those are steroid hormones, 4 rings of carbon. Okay? And that was, we also talked about some modifiers. We talked about phospholipids. Phospholipids are found in cell membranes. You take away a fatty acid chain and replace that fatty acid chain with a phosphate group. That phosphate group is hydrophilic. The fatty acid chains remain hydrophobic. So you put 2 of those 2 chains together and you will build cell membranes. We looked at another modification. We looked at waxes. Right? Waxes are really important to who? plants and also animals, right? Not so much about our ears. That's a long fatty acid chain with a long alcohol together. They resist degradation, high melting point. Okay, that's it, content-wise. Now, preparing for the essays. You have these to help you. We still have proteins to talk about and nucleic acids to talk about. How could you pre-prepare for those? Read, notes, book, Bozeman's, yes? Now, keep in mind, what else will I throw down on those essays, those frequently asked questions? What have we talked about that will also show up? Highly suggested reading and thinking, so I highly suggest you do it. What else? A step further, right? You have 4 categories of step furthers, right? You have sustainability topics, NGSS topics, career topics, and things I find interesting. All I would do is open up a document for semester 1 and put it in with your semester 1 calendar and your claim evidence, reason about your goals, store it in there. And this is personal to you, right? Not to anybody else in the class. This isn't like, oh, share me yours, and I'm sure it's really good. Okay, no. Do your own work on this, okay? In your own words, pick one of the steps that's interesting to you and write which category you got it from, sustainability, NGSS, careers or other, or interesting things. And then you read about whatever I presented you with and jot something down about what that was about or whatever that link was. And then you take it a step further. Follow another link. Follow some other interesting thing that you see connected to that or that you connect to it. Tell me about that. I'm going to ask you to straight out. It's going to be the step further question. What was your first step? Which category was it out of? What's your second step? Okay? That's you getting the voice and choice on what you want on your essay questions. Okay? Last but not least, I'm betting I will throw a chi-square problem in there. Now, on your quiz today, your chi-square was binary, right? It's not this, it's this, right? But be open to having more choices. Okay, so you might need 2 degrees of freedom or whatever. So you maybe do some practice problems on that and do a Bozeman on that because you definitely will get a chi-square problem on that. Okay, and then let's not ignore chapter 1. What did we learn in chapter 1 besides chi-square? 4 big ideas. Did we learn about the characteristics of life? Yes. Do you think those could possibly show up on your test? Yes. Now, there's so little for me to ask you. It's actually very helpful because I'm probably going to ask about what the 4 big ideas are. I'm probably going to ask about the characteristics of life. I'm probably going to ask you a chi-square problem. I'm probably going to ask you about the properties of water. I'm probably going to ask you about one of the important organic molecules. I'm probably going to ask you about a highly suggested reading and thinking and a step further, right? You know what I'm going to ask you, okay? So you have a lot within your control and with some choices in there as well. It is not a lucky thing to do well on that. It is I am prepared for this type of a thing, right? Okay? Tell the person next to you what's your next thing you need to do to get ready for these essays.